WGBR News Talk 1150. Good morning. The time is 8:36, and this is your Friday edition of Newsmakers. What a week it's been, but we made it through. The weather has cleared up. It's absolutely gorgeous. I got two gorgeous people in the studio with me this morning. Mr. Rick Pridgen, member of the Board of Education of Wayne County. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Carol. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I actually prefer to just give you a title of friend because you're a friend to so many.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
But it is true. And joining Rick and I is Mr. David Lewis, Assistant Superintendent of the Wayne County Public Schools.
Good morning.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
So glad that both of you could join us. We're going to surprise a lot of people. We're not going to jump right into anything controversial. We're going to talk about some fun stuff, and it's all about athletics. How about that?
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
David's looking at me like, what controversial? So we're not talking about anything controversial. But no, we're going to, you know what? We're going to cover some issues that may be of interest to people, and nothing's more exciting to parents than athletics in school because we spend a lot of time nurturing those kids, coaching them, and so you've got some good news going on.
We do have some good news. First of all, is good news in general about the state of athletics in Wayne County. We're fortunate to have a good cadre of coaches working with our kids. We just believe so strongly that athletics can have such a positive impact on our students that we really have tried hard to make sure that we've got good coaches in place, that we give them good facilities to play in, we equip them with the necessary equipment and supplies to be successful on the field. But athletics is about a lot more than wins and losses. It's about what you learn from being part of a team, making sure that you handle success in an appropriate way, making sure you handle failure in an appropriate way. The High School Athletic Association has had multiple studies done to document the positive impacts that participating in athletics has on kids. As a group, athletes tend to do better in school with their grades. They tend to have fewer discipline problems. They tend to have better attendance. We believe it's because they're involved in something structured, something organized, something fun, something that they are highly interested in and motivated to do well in. Because of that, we just want to make sure our athletic programs and the offerings that we put out to kids are as good as we can make them.
Well, and I think that is so very important. Two things that you said. Number one, it does tie into the academics because kids know you don't do well in academics, you're not going to get to participate. So it's a reward.
That's
it's
right.
a risk and a reward situation. And the other part is when you talk about success and failure, I do think it's important to get kids prepared for the failures in life. There's no way to escape them, and if we coddle our children to the point that everything is supposed to be a success, wow, they're going to be in for a big surprise when they become an adult.
And I think it's so important, too, Carol, when you have two teams playing one another, one's going to win.
Yes.
I mean, it's always going to be, you're always going to have a winner, but you're going to have one that loses. But they don't really lose. They gain so much from that experience, and, life doesn't always throw us a bed of roses. Fortunately, with athletics, even when a team loses and they've played their best, it teaches us a very valuable life lesson that we may try very hard in our lives on many different things and we may fail. But at the same time, we learned a lot of lessons along the way. My father-in-law always told me, son, don't ever stick your head out on a chopping block if you don't expect to get it chopped off. And that's
words.
in business or anything else. But fortunately, I think that a lot of athletes learn some valuable lessons that just because we lost one game doesn't mean that we're defeated in what we do. We're going to go out there and we're going to try again and we're going to go at it. David, tell about Rosewood not being able to play football.
Now you're trying to start some controversy.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
That's because it's not football season, Carol.
You're so funny, Rick. All right, well, we're not going to even go there for the moment.
I'll be getting phone calls about that later today. Thank you, Mr. Pridgen. I appreciate
That's
that.
the only thing that right now about 10,000 people have heard. What? We can't play
We've got
football.
cars running off the road right now.
But you make a great point. When you do have two teams, when you have two individuals, one is going to win, one's going to lose, but the experiences are going to be great. Mm-hmm. And the same token goes, parents need to explain to their children, there may be someone on the team better than you in physical capabilities, but that doesn't mean that you can't still be the best that you can be.
Right.
They need to make these children understand there are athletes out there. I'm no Michael Jordan, never would be. Mm-hmm. He's phenomenal, but if I decided to play basketball, I'd still want to be the very best that I could be.
Right.
And so there are great life lessons as well as, in terms of getting kids from behind cell phones, computers, and game systems, get them out and let them participate. That's all that matters.
Yes, right. Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
That's all that matters. Well, you wanted to talk about North Carolina High School Association making the mercy rule.
We had the North Carolina High School Athletic Association annual meeting yesterday, and at that meeting it was announced that the association board of directors had approved what amounts to a mercy rule in both football and basketball to take effect next year. Now, parents who are familiar with baseball know that baseball has for a long time had such a rule. If a team is ahead by 10 runs or more after 5 innings, the game is over. They don't finish the game. And in fact, in football and in some cases basketball, we've seen coaches make sort of a gentleman's agreement at halftime. If the game's out of hand, they'll let the clock continue to run, even if it's a dead ball situation, things like that, to try to speed the game along because the outcome of the game really is no longer in question. Yesterday's announcement was that the High School Association had formalized such a rule to be put in place next year. And the rules are these. In football, if a team is ahead by 42 points at halftime or at any point after halftime, the clock will continue to run even in dead ball situations, or a game can be ended if it is mutually agreed upon by the coaches. I don't know how often we'll see that. My instinct is that we'll see that running clock with no problem, but I don't know of many coaches I know of that I think are going to pull their teams off the field before that final horn sounds. In basketball, it's a similar premise. The point differential is 40 points. If a team is ahead by 40 points at halftime or at any point from that point on, the clock will continue to run even during dead ball situations, with the exception of timeouts. If a team calls a timeout or if an official calls a timeout, they will stop the clock there. But typical dead ball situations in football might be a dropped pass or a runner going out of bounds. In those cases, they would allow the clock to keep running. In basketball, you normally stop the clock for things like out-of-bounds plays, free throws, turnovers, things like that. This rule would basically say that in those situations, we'll keep the clock running and go ahead and get this thing over with. Like I say, those kinds of things have been going on for years behind the scenes between coaches who make that agreement at halftime when the game really is out of hand. But the NCHSAA took steps this week to formalize that and to make it a statewide guideline.
And I'm glad that they did, and I hope that you're right. I hope coaches will continue to allow the play to go on and just let the clock run, because teaching your kids to quit isn't necessarily the right attitude that you want to give them, because at some point in time they carry that on and say, well, it comes to a point I can just quit. Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily what we want to teach our kids, but persevere. We're not going to extend this and make your pain any greater. We're just going to, try to help you out and let that clock just run. I think that's a great rule.
Well, I think when a game is that lopsided, we use both practices and games as learning situations for the kids. Well, once it gets past a certain point, you're not really learning anything about yourself that you don't already know, okay? The team that's ahead by the 40 points knows that they are that much better than the other team, and at that point you start, now you do start getting some playing time for kids who might not normally get to play very much in that circumstance, and that's good for them. You can teach them a lot during that time. The team that's behind by 40 points, they're not learning much from that situation either. They now will be keenly aware of what they need to work on in practice next week. The other thing too is I heard a stat yesterday that they looked at last year's game results, and these rules would have impacted about 10% of football games statewide last year. And of course, the vast majority of those would be in regular season games between teams maybe in the same conference, maybe the top team and the bottom team. I don't think you're going to see this often at all in playoff situations or in tournament situations, because when you start getting down to teams that are more evenly matched, this just won't apply there.
No, and if you do see that in playoff situations, we need to send those teams to the NCAA or something, because that's strong. Absolutely. Right there.
That's right.
That is strong. So you focus a lot on athletics in your duties as an assistant superintendent.
Yes, my role is as much about trying to assist schools, athletic directors, and coaches with issues related to compliance, monitoring, eligibility monitoring, things like that. Sometimes we'll have situations come up where I have to investigate to determine whether or not the appropriate decision has been made with regard to eligibility or a player's status with participation. I, of course, coordinate with the High School Athletic Association a great deal to make sure that we are doing things in Wayne County the way we're supposed to, and then we just kind of deal with any situation that arise like that. I'll tell you that the bulk of the legwork is done at the school level, and we've got a great group of folks handling that.
Fantastic. Well, we've got to take a quick break here. We're with Rick Pridgen and David Lewis, and tell you more about that in just a minute after these messages on WGBR News Talk 1150. WGPR News Talk 1150. David and I are in here beating Rick over his little funny newsmakers on this Friday with Rick Pridgen, member of the Wayne County Board of Education, David Lewis, Assistant Superintendent with the Wayne County Public Schools. Good morning again, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Carol. Thank you for having us.
Hey, thanks so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and talk about what's on everybody's mind, and that is you guys are going to meet Monday to discuss. On the agenda, it says approval of method for the construction and financing of the two new middle schools. This has been kind of going back and forth. Obviously, this has been in great need for 12, 14 years.
Absolutely.
And both sides, and I call it both sides because we're talking about the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Education are saying, we've got to have this, we both approve.
Right.
Now there's details, and there's some disagreement. There's some probably a little bit of hurt feelings on both sides. And it's all about which method to go with.
That's true. And ultimately, it's all about the children. Well, I think both of us, the commissioners and the Board of Education, realize that. Interestingly enough, and Carol, let me tell you a little bit about the schools that we are wanting to build. We looked at 9 different architects in building Spring Creek Middle School and building Grantham Middle School. We had them come in and do proposals. We told them basically what type of schools that we wanted, this type of thing. And one of them really impressed us with a school that they had already built. And several of us board members went and we took a look at that school. And interestingly enough, about 6 years ago, there's a couple of us on the board talking about building future schools, doing geothermal energy and that type of thing to save money. But this was also a school that was totally solar powered. And we could see where over a period of about 40 years, we could probably the schools could pay for themselves if we were to go this route. With geothermal and with solar power, and then of course sell power back to the grid. The school that we patented after was Sandy Grove Middle School that was built in Hope County below Fayetteville. It was just a phenomenal school. Last year, after we chose this particular architect that had designed this school and had built this school, we found out that later when we went to a state school board conference in November, they were chosen, and that school was chosen as the #1 architectural firm and school that was built in the state of North Carolina last year. And more recently, that particular school was chosen #1 in the nation out of 700 new schools that were built last year. So we know we're on the right track with looking at the future and building a high energy efficient school, that type of thing, a school that will pay for itself in the long run. The taxpayers would have gotten the school free if we spend that money wisely. The problem that I guess we've had with the county commissioners has been the delivery method, how we're going to actually go about with this school. The school board wanted to do a capital lease program or lease purchase option with the architect, and the architect being the CM and building the school completely and doing everything under his umbrella. He would actually in turn get tax credits, lease the school for 5 years to the school system, but we would make a 20-year payment that would be level through those 5 years, and then it'd be turned over to the county, and we would continue it for until 20 years. There's about 6 different delivery methods that are allowed by the state of North Carolina, and that was one of the methods that was allowed. When we went before the local LGC, they said this looks more of like a capital lease, and we'd like for you to take that back and maybe rewrite it as a capital lease, and we did so, brought it back to the table, and the commissioner said, no, you're going to build design, bid, build. Well, a lot of people in the community are saying, well, how do the commissioners get involved? Well, we're one of the few states in the United States that the commissioners have the final say-so on how school money are spent. In most states, the school boards have taxing authority, and they don't go through the county commissioners to actually get approval for how they go about doing things. So that's how the county commissioners in North Carolina get involved in this process. They're wanting to go with design, bid, build. We still have a little bit of disagreement in whether we think we're going to end up spending more money by going through the capital lease program, which they think we would spend more money that way. We think we'll spend more money with design, bid, build. One fact, though, if we do go with design, bid, build, which the county commissioners wants us to do, we're pretty sure we're doing it the way the school board wanted to do it. We would be able to open those doors in August of 2015. But we think we'll probably end up having another year's delay by having to go with design, bid, build. And if we do that, fortunately, we were able to lock in an interest rate at a lower interest rate, but we don't know what the interest rates are going to be a year from now. So there's a good possibility it might be at a higher interest rate and that type of thing. I will tell you that the county commissioners have agreed to put in $700,000 a year as far as into the payment, where the school board will be using $2.2 million to go into the payment for a total payment each year of $2,900,000. They've agreed to help us with that. And of course, we had a couple of years of battles back and forth just asking, would you all be willing to help us? But we never got an answer. But here we've gotten closer together with this new board that we've had with commissioners. They've agreed that schools are a priority. It's just kind of how we go about doing it. That's where we're at. We'll probably end up having to do Monday what they've asked us to do, and we'll move forward and we'll get schools. We might not get them in the timely manner that we wanted, and we might not be able to do it at the lower interest rate that we wanted to do it. We're at the point, that crossroads, where we will see new schools in those two areas, and they're so badly needed. The Grantham Elementary School is on a septic system. We can't put another trailer there. You've got K-8 there, and we need that middle school there. When we look at the Spring Creek area, of course, you know, the high school has flourished over the last 12 years in that particular area. We've got, 15 trailers, I think, David, at the elementary school at Spring Creek.
Wow.
And we're planning on pulling a grade out of the elementary school, putting it in this middle school, and then bringing the 6th and 7th, 8th graders into the middle school at Spring Creek that will be built. And we're actually still going to have to build on more classrooms. But when we look at these schools, we have to look at the core areas like the cafeterias and that type of thing. They were only built for a certain amount of students, and we're already 300 students over capacity in one of those schools. So we've got to do something about these classrooms. You know, you can add all the mobile units that you want to, but you can't add more tables in the cafeteria. These two schools are drastically needed, and the sooner the better.
I think you covered every facet of it that people could have questions about. At least I certainly hope so. Interim County Manager George Wood will be coming in next week, and he's going to talk about it as well. Thank you so much, Rick Pridgen, for that information. David Lewis, thank you for joining me this morning.
Glad to be a part of your program.